Hello, guys, and welcome. Today, I am joined by the wonderful Gabriel Ashton Brown to talk about The Last of Us episodes 1 to 3. I am so excited. The reason I decided to do this live stream actually was because I was talking to Ashton. Ashton. I was
You're
talking
good.
to Gabe. I just love saying your full name,
Oh,
Gabriel
thank
Ashton
you.
Brown, all in its entirety. But I was talking to you about The Last of Us episode 1 via Instagram, and we just had a lot of notes, and I thought it was just really good. And I know a lot of people are watching the show, have been fans of the game. I made a video on the parallels between The Last of Us and sort of dehumanizing group think thing going on in culture today. And I feel like the show as a whole, the game as a whole, just has such magnificent parallels for
Yeah.
humanity and the reason to be pro-human. But anyway, Gabriel Ashton Brown, thank you so much for being here. Would you care to introduce yourself
I,
to the folks?
I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me, Kimmy.
Of course.
Yeah, my name is Gabriel. I go by Gabe to my friends, and I'm an actor, voice actor, and director. And I've been voice acting for about 2 years now. And I've been acting since I was a little kid, and directing ever since I could hold a camera, basically, and point it and tell my brothers, "Okay, you do this. I'm doing to do this," and we're constantly making videos when we were just little kids. But most of my work is with the stage, basically, or it has been. I've kind of gotten a little bit more experimental the past few years in doing live shows over Zoom, or like doing short films, or trying to find ways to combine both. So a lot of my more recent work has been multimedia, and like just been a good combination of a few different platforms and mediums.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I love dark humor. I love video games. And as a voice actor, I get to be in them sometimes if I'm lucky. I've only been in a few games, but every time I am in a game, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
I love it. That's
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah. Most of my work as a voice actor is in commercial or e-learning and explainer videos, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And since the pandemic, that's just picked up so much. So it's been
awesome.
good. And I
That's
navigate
good
it
to hear.
every single day, but that's where I'm at right now. Yeah.
That is really cool. And you had a project come out last year that you directed, right?
Yeah. No, every year I try to get at least one more thing on my rep of
Yeah,
like how I'm doing as a director.
right.
I was able to direct the musical Crazy for You, which is a Gershwin show.
Oh,
And
nice.
it's called like the new Gershwin's show or something, even though it came out in the 90s. And what it is, it's like a combination of a few different reviews and other older musicals from that like 1930s era. And
Yeah.
they're all kind of smushed into one, and all the songs are like Gershwin's best music. And that was really fantastic. And I was able to do some pre-shoots beforehand and incorporate these film screens basically as part of the movie,
That's really cool.
for some of
Okay.
it. And so those are on my website, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
In watching a few of those in comparison with the stage stuff that's going on, and that show is so funny.
Yeah.
It's really wild, really bombastic.
Got
I
it.
highly
Crazy
recommend
for
it.
you.
Crazy
Okay.
for You. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
the reason we connected is we are both affiliated with the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, FAIR. And we have like an artist meetup every month, right? And
Yep.
I met you through that, but then later on through Instagram. And I'm just curious, as before we get into The Last of Us, like if you could just summarize what, as an artist, as an actor and director, what did you see in your field that brought you over to FAIR and to care about pro-human issues?
That's that's like the hardest thing, but also the most important thing, because it's still something that I'm reckoning with every day. And that's how my industry, my arts industry, decided to be deemed inessential in a time when I think art was more essential than anything because it inspires hope. And it gives you
Right on.
life and joy. And at a time when people are suffering and in need of human connection, art was squashed and stamped out.
Yeah.
And so I kind of found Fair because I knew somewhere deep within me, I was like, the human connection needs to remain alive. We need to continue doing this, and it shouldn't be just dependent on whether you have Wi-Fi or not. Um,
Ooh, yeah.
and and so I was like, all right. And I kind of stumbled across Fair, and I immediately was like, hi, let me do something for you. I reached out, and now I run the Fair News Weekly podcast, which
That's what's
is
up.
a review every single week of Fair News and other articles and pieces that Fair members and board members and affiliates and chapter leaders are all up to.
Yeah.
So it's all about people coming together for our common humanity, in treating people with dignity, respect, fairness, and understanding. So
That is what's up. I love
right.
that.
Yeah.
And the podcast is, I just want to link it in the comments just in case anyone is curious. Is there a link to the podcast for Fair?
Yeah. There is. Let me pull it up.
In the meantime, I'm gonna just type Fair.
It's on Fair News Weekly podcast is on I think every major podcast platform. So it's on
Okay.
Spotify, it's on Apple, it's Google, and you can find it pretty much yeah, like
Wherever
the first thing that comes
podcasts
up is the Apple one.
got you.
But
Okay.
yeah,
I'll link that in the description after the live stream,
sure.
as well as Gabriel's website is already in the description if anyone wants to find out more.
Cool.
All right, let's get into this.
Mhm.
Episode. Should we start with episode 1 to like do a natural progression of this?
Oh my goodness.
I think we should,
yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
All
yeah.
right.
Let's start with episode 1.
So
Actually, can we start before episode 1?
let's start before episode
Our
1.
pre-thoughts.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
have so many opinions on this.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really, really nervous about this show before being able to watch anything, because I love The Last of Us. I've played it 4 times through, in the past, gosh, what did it come out in, like 2012, 2013?
2013.
I've played it, like 4 times, probably 2 or 3 times within the span of 2 years, and then I replayed it last year, on the remastered version,
That's awesome.
and I love this story. I just loved it, and
Mhm.
now I played it when I was 14. I was Ellie's age, which is kind of crazy when you think about it,
That
and
is,
you're like, "Oh, yeah. Oh, was I 14? I was something like that. I was like 14 or 15." So,
dude.
it's been a while,
Yeah.
but, I just really resonated with Joel
Yeah.
and with Ellie. And I
Mhm.
think part of that too was I was raised by a single dad, and I could
Wow.
see a really strong relationship with that, and that I resonated with that. So,
Man,
this
that is
this
awesome.
story meant a lot.
Yeah.
And the game was really, really fun, and I didn't like shooter games. I didn't like games where I had to go online and fight people. I like
Mhm.
story-based games. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. It's a great way to like
Yeah.
preface why we are interested in this and how
Yeah.
we're even talking about this. Because I got into gaming before I moved to the US. And I moved to the US in about actually 2013 when the first game came out. But I had a kind of, traumatic is a bit too extra of a description, but I had a cousin who had leukemia, and unfortunately he passed away very young. Lost the battle to cancer.
I'm so sorry.
And
That's
together we were playing God of War on I think
Oh,
PS3 or PS2. And ever since then, I don't know, I just have had a strong connection to like video games, and I think the Infamous game was my intro to that world, and then it always just was a fond memory of something that connected me with my siblings and my cousins. And I got introduced to The Last of Us a little later, in I think like around 2016, so about 3 years after the first game. And as a sort of nomad in the US, I feel like there was just something about that survivalist mentality and the fact that you kind of just out there in the wild. And I think that's what I related to in the story. Of course, I love the father-daughter relationship of Joel and Ellie, but also, not to go into sort of speaking about representation, but as a girl kind of who has a connection to gaming, it was great to see this kind of human connection and just like father-daughter relationship portrayed, and not always just this brute shoot and loot type game that we had been seeing before. So I did really connect to that, of course, but the writing was like as good as a TV show. And I think
Yeah.
I was very, very excited to introduce the story of the game, the premise of the game, to two people that I love that don't play games, who can't stand the sight of cutscenes. Like, it is, you have to develop a taste for that. Yeah, and so that's why I was like, you know what? Let's see how the show is doing. And how did you feel about episode 1? And do you feel like the show so far has done the video game justice?
All right. So episode 1, I watched it the night that it came out. And
Yeah.
I was so pleasantly surprised because I just thought they had done such a good job. And now I know some people are like, oh my gosh, I hated it, whatever. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But I really, really enjoyed it. I loved
Yeah.
what they were doing, all these extra new scenes, giving us more background on the virus as well as on Sarah
Yeah.
and on Tess and Joel. I
Yeah.
just thought it was really strong world building.
Mm-hmm.
And the QZ, how dangerous of a space that area is.
Oh yeah.
I feel like in the game we're barely there, and
Mm-hmm.
this show version made it seem like a pervading force. And
Yes.
now, like, yeah, and maybe that was just like, spoilers, they're burning bodies and stuff. So I'm like, you don't really see much of that in the game. There's a
Yeah.
lot of details that I'm sure that, well, the game writers and developers have continued and evolved since then, but I'm sure they had a lot of stuff like that they had to cut.
Exactly.
And that, they're picking what they can. But you can do
Mm-hmm.
more with the show and you can do more with the game. It kind of depends, the different medium.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
I really, really enjoyed it.
I loved it, and that intro scene, not even scene, just the whole like act 1 of it with
Mhm.
the development of Sarah and
Mhm.
paying, like, honoring the game with certain direct speech quotations, like put
Mhm.
into the script, and like, your watch is broken, or no, that was later in the game. What was it? I sell hardcore drugs, when Sarah's
Yeah.
like trying to explain where she got the money for the watch. And I love the backstory. And just before I kind of chat about episode 1, I just want to shout out Naughty Dog. I think I have a very huge appreciation for Naughty Dog, the company that made
Mhm.
the Last of Us games as well as Uncharted,
Yep.
because there really is an emphasis to quality and emphasis on quality that we don't get with a lot of TV shows. And I'm specifically saying TV shows, not games, because games, I don't know, there's a different standard there, but there is just the way Neil Druckmann, creator of The Last of Us, and he also, I believe he wrote for Uncharted, the way he creates these duo characters that kind of have to rely on each other, like Uncharted 4, there was Sam and Drake, and Last of Us,
Mhm.
we have Joel and Ellie, and you see this kind of duo thing where I'm going to talk about Bill and Frank later on. We have Sam and Henry, and on and on and on. Even just Tess and Joel, like pairing up. I
Mhm.
love how they emphasize the way we need each other as humans. I don't. I feel like that's a theme with Naughty Dog. Jack. Anyway, I've already forgotten the names, but I love it, and I love their evolution, but just their commitment to showing how we need
Or
each
just
other.
good storytelling.
Yeah,
Gosh, the writing that's in Uncharted is fantastic too. I
it
mean,
is.
it's like it's an epitome of the adventure story, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's so wild, so impossible, and yet so fun.
Right.
And the back and forth between Drake and Elena, like all
Yeah,
of it's good.
I
But even
love it.
Naughty Dog is like an organization is just great. I mean, I also grew up playing the Crash Bandicoot games.
Yes,
I love those things,
I
and
love.
just Naughty Dog,
Yeah,
the best. Naughty Dog and Rockstar are my favorite,
yeah,
in terms of the game production companies, but
exactly.
yeah, they just do so well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so okay, going back to The
Yeah,
Last of Us episode 1, um, I was a little skeptical about the dynamic between these new characters like Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey playing a new Joel and a new Ellie,
Mhm.
because they weren't allowed. Fun fact: they weren't allowed to like study the game characters.
Really?
They
I didn't know
kind of
that.
had to, yeah. Well, this was based off of the podcast where Neil Druckmann, Craig Mazin, and Troy Baker talk about the show, and yeah, they weren't. So what we're seeing is sort of an original Joel from a sort
Mm.
of prompt or baseline, you know, collection of qualities that they have to portray, but none of it is really based on the game, like
Mhm.
studying it, off of the game. So what do you think of? Okay, well, I mean,
Yeah, what
I
do
have
you
my
think?
thoughts, but what do you think of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey as Joel and Ellie?
Well, I think Pedro is doing or Pedro, is doing a really great job.
Yeah.
Um, Now that you've said that, that does clarify a lot of things that I'm like, "Okay, this is a different sort of Joel." He's much more aggressive and still as deeply sad and depressed. But in the game, because you're playing him for much of it and you get in the back of the head. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm as a filmmaker, I'm watching it and I'm like, "Okay, are we going to go with like video game sort of shots for this thing?" And some of it I'm like, "Oh, this feels just like the game. This
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
just like it." Um,
exactly.
but because we're now seeing his front side more often, we really do get to see his pain,
Mm,
and his age.
yeah,
He's a lot older, than I in the game, I'm like, "Oh, he's in his 40s or something, right?" No, he's
right.
56 in the show. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, you seem." I don't want to call anybody old who's 56,
Mm,
but he's an old 56.
yeah,
And I say that just because he's gone through so much
exactly.
that it
It
shows.
wears on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And this now is a world where people don't get to live old,
Mhm.
which I'm sure we'll talk about some more as we
Ooh.
get to it, but this is not a show where people get to grow old anymore.
Yeah.
This is where people die and they can't walk anymore, they can't run fast enough, or they're
Mhm.
just not smart enough in a certain situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And what about Bella Ramsey as Ellie?
Oh, yes, Bella Ramsey, she's doing great.
I
Um,
love I love what she's doing.
she's so fun. It's also just great. I watched Game of Thrones and loved the both of them in that show as well, and so part of me is like, "Oh, HBO, you're only pulling from the shows you've done the things before with or all these other."
Yes.
Anyway,
Right.
um, uh, but it's good to see a young actor like her
Yeah.
evolve and grow through this kind of process. There's a few things like in the last episode, she had a few line deliveries that I was like, "Oh, this is a little unnatural," but, like, I give her space because 'cause I'm like, she's learning.
She is, yeah, she's
She's
a
learning,
child.
and she is
Yeah.
doing a very good job.
Yeah.
Um, but that's just where I'm at, where I'm like, "That sounded kinda funny, but alright.
Right.
Alright, Ellie."
Are you talking about the speech in episode 3?
No, no.
Oh,
Well, part of that. No, it was when, she gets into the floorboards. She's talking to herself. There was something
oh,
there, or maybe it was, like, right afterwards when she's just emerged from there.
got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say Bella's Ellie is a lot scarier to me. And I
That's such a good point.
I kind of feel like freaked out a little bit because I'm like, oh, we're giving birth to a psycho here. When I mean, she's like, we talked about this on Instagram with voice notes, but towards the end of episode 1, um, Joel is faced with a federal officer that is kind of caught him and Ellie and Tess escaping from the QZ, holds them up at gunpoint, and Joel has his flashback of protecting, or rather, not being able to protect Sarah, and that's how his daughter dies. And he's faced with a kind of similar scenario, and this time just goes after the federal officer and just like, I don't know if he beats him unconscious or to death, but this like primal instinct to protect kicks in, and he's like pow pow pow. But Ellie she's like loving it. She's like,
Her
oh my
eyes
goodness.
light up. Like,
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh my gosh, somebody's gonna kill for me. That's amazing." I
Yeah.
love that. And that
Yeah.
energy, and you can tell, I think, what's his name? Druckmann? I think he mentioned
Neil.
something
Yeah.
about, yeah, um, you can already see this toxic relationship forming, but it's
Yes.
also a codependent relationship forming, and
Yes.
this is the initial spark of that. That's really, "Okay, here we go."
Yeah.
Because Joel, like, he didn't I mean, this is where he's acting in a way that he wished he probably would've or could have,
Yeah.
um, the first
Right.
time. And this time, there was nothing to hold him back, and he was like, What do I have to lose at this point? I've already
Yeah.
lost everything."
Right.
Um, but yeah, no, Bella Ramsey is very
Yeah.
dark, and I'm wondering, without spoiling, because I don't wanna spoil what comes later in the game, how that's gonna affect her character when she does, deal with some even darker issues.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. There
I think
that's
they're
I
setting
can't say
her
anything
up
else.
for something quite, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
There's a lot of
excited.
there's a lot of, inciting
Mhm.
incidences to come.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what did you think of drawing parallels between the 2020 COVID pandemic that we experienced and the pandemic of the cordyceps of The Last of Us? Did you notice any irony or any lessons that you could draw from the experience
I
they
think
go through in this fictional world?
the show is doing a lot to nod at the fact that I think we've been through a pandemic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I'm like, "Oh, this feels like a direct aside to the audience."
Mhm.
Um, and it's like I kinda chuckle when I watch it. Maybe that's me feeling alienated and into my own, like, cognitive dissonance or whatever, and then I'm like, "Oh, here we
Right, right.
are." Yeah. Um, I mean, the viruses that we've dealt with in person and in real life versus in the game are very different.
Yeah,
They're not really comparable, but
exactly.
what is comparable is human nature. And the way that we react to things, I mean, human humankind is so fragile,
Mhm.
and I think that we forget that kind of
Yeah.
often, and, like, we in our normal day to day, we just kind of are acting and moving and doing things just the way we are, and, like, look back at
Mhm.
2019, we weren't really thinking about it, um, and then by the
Boom.
time 2020 came around, it was overnight, you
Yeah,
know, for a lot of people,
yeah.
and I just think that, yeah, what is a commonality between our 2 worlds is fear and the way humankind has the tendency to fight.
Yeah,
It's in our nature to be tribal. It's in our nature to wanna fight and have conflict and ostracize
yeah,
and bully and to exclude.
yeah.
Um, that that's normal, and that's kinda scary to say that that's normal,
Mhm,
because we wanna say that we're inclusive, and we wanna say that we are caring about each other and trying to approach people with understanding, but when fear takes over, you
mhm.
really don't have that sort of control anymore.
Exactly.
Um, and I mean, I think everybody in our own relationships and in our lives during the pandemic had conversations with people where we saw fear completely overcome a person's character,
Mhm.
and it brings out, I think, the worst in people.
Yeah,
Sorry, I think it does.
yeah.
Um, because when you're acting out of fear instead of love, even if it's from a place of concern, um, you end up sacrificing what it means to be human.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's
I
that's where I'm at.
I absolutely agree. You see that on like the individual level with deciding who are we saving? Like, one fascinating thought experiment is the beginning opening of Act One, Episode One, where Joel is driving with Tommy and Sarah in the car as everyone's going crazy. And the question Tommy poses is to say, there's actually a family stranded on the side of the road, and he's like, should we stop for them? I think something along those lines, like asking Joel, should we stop and pick them up? And Joel is like, no, and just keeps driving. And you have to make those decisions that are quite hard on like the normal person to person level, but taking it a notch higher. Like, do you hear my accent switch up there? Southern hemisphere. Like, take it a step higher. Like, how do we, like Fedra, for example, Fedra having to manage this whole thing. And I think at the time, Fedra wasn't a thing officially. It was just sort of the military, the police, whatever. What are your opinions on the ethics of managing this sort of...
Sorry. Can you go back a second? I like...
Did it freeze?
Out. Yeah, it freeze.
Oh, my bad. Okay.
Froze.
Basically, my question is, what do you think about the like ethical, the ethical footing, the ethical grounding that organizations have to take to manage something like this, a virus of this scale? Because I mean, how else do you manage it apart from put people in quarantine zones and prevent them from leaving and do these horrendous things, bomb cities to prevent this? Like, what are your opinions on that?
I mean, the second episode really starts off that way of like, all right, we're gonna like the woman in, was it Jakarta?
Yeah.
She was saying, yeah, we should just blow up this entire city. But at that point, now we know from episode 3 that wouldn't have really done anything because the fungi was in the grain or something like that.
Yeah.
But as a response, all right, we should blow up and just try to nuke everybody. It goes back to the idea, you know, the ends justify the means. And as a musical theater person, the ends don't justify the means, they justify the beans. Sorry, that's a Into the Woods reference if anybody is an Into the Woods person. No.
Writing that down.
It justifies the beans.
Okay.
No. But the ends never do justify the means. At least that's where I come from.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's a difference in having a third party sort of say, this is how we're going to handle this, versus the individual person from within the original group saying, I want to handle it this way. And that for me comes down to risk assessment. Everybody in this game, they really, really do have to make a lot of risk assessments because there's danger at every turn. But then our world is like that nowadays too. And that I don't want to any party, any big organization, anything like that, any company even. It's partly why I'm a voice actor and I work for myself now too, is because I don't want to be solely dependent upon what this party or group says.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's wise to put my safety in somebody else's hands in that way.
Yeah.
There are times in which we need to do that. We need to depend on others. We are vulnerable. We all have those vulnerable moments and stuff. But I think that's where it comes down to an individual level of, all right, you surround yourself with the best people. Surround yourself with the people who are going to protect you, that you'll show up and protect them. And that, individual risk assessments need to be made, and everybody is different. Everybody has a different social circle, and everybody has a different body, a different way of handling things, a different belief. And that the best thing we can do is support people in having those things and feeling free enough to talk about them. And
anyone who is watching that isn't familiar with like Fedra, for example, Fedra is kind of the police, or like, police is such a very basic word.
Police state.
It is a police state.
Can I say something else? I had a bit of a realization the other day. This is one of my notes that I wrote down because it's kind of a stupid realization because it might literally just be me talking out of my butt, but it also kind of fits. And it's that the title of the game in the show is called The Last of Us. But written out, that also says The Last of US. which is unique because in this game you're going across the country. You're following the Pioneer Trail or whatever, but it's the last remnants of the
The United
America,
States,
you know,
yeah.
of the United States. This is its decay.
Mhm.
And then I thought it was interesting in episode 2, and this is kind of what sparked it, was because Tess says something like, Joel's like, "We're gonna go back home. We're going back to Boston." She's like, "That's not my home." And
Mm.
that this show and this story is so much about homelessness,
Mhm.
um, not just of location because everybody is now misplaced, but their hearts are too.
Mhm.
And everybody's broken, and that yeah, this is this is my
Yeah.
idea. I'm like, "Oh, the last of the US and the home and the"
Yeah.
I don't know if it actually is
It
intended in that way, but it definitely rings true.
Yeah. I noticed the title sequence of each episode. There's this initially I was like, this is very abstract. I wonder why they would do that. But I actually noticed that the slime mold looking thing that pulsates out at the beginning of the show, I think actually is creating a map of the US. And I
It's so
hadn't
Game of
noticed that.
Thrones. Sorry, Game of
Is
Thrones does the same sort of thing, kinda.
okay. Because it
Not with
pretty
the
much
fungi,
like
but
transforms from like a map of the US and then goes into like a DNA sequencing
mhm.
thing and then it ends in like Joel and Ellie standing. But
Yeah, that's interesting too, because when you look at, like, a map, it
right.
looks like that, kind of,
Yeah,
where you could kinda draw the lines to make it look like that.
exactly. So I think there is
Mm.
a part in there where the United States is a central theme,
Mhm.
especially like I don't know how to put this into words, but a sort of like unity or a reminder that we might be ideologically divided by state lines, but if this was to happen, we really have to depend on each other. And you see
Right.
this connection and this network. And I'm spoiler alert for in a very minor, like it's not going to ruin the story, but you will see this sort of network of humanity as we
Mhm.
go from the East Coast all the way to the West. Um, and so I just say all that to say I don't think your theory is off. I think there's something very valid to that.
Cool.
Yeah. Um,
In the way that Fedra ties in, Fedra's like, it's not American, and in a
yes.
way, it kind of is, like, I I I don't think it leans in any one particular political party or anything,
Yeah.
um, but it's completely stripped the rights of Americans,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
our human rights, in addition to the rights that this country has
I
laid out
love
as
that.
innate to every single person born under American eyes, at least, I
I'm
should say.
literally writing that down.
Oh, okay.
Fedra is not it literally isn't. It is everything but.
Yeah,
Um
um,
it
it
is it's
it
a great revelation.
in that first episode when we were going back over Instagram, I said that
Yeah.
it reminded me of
Mhm.
um, like, the stories that I've heard from North Korea,
Yeah.
and the that may sound drastic for some of you who haven't heard either the stories from North Korea or haven't watched the show fully yet or whatever, but it had a lot of parallels in a lot of different ways, and one of the scenes that really did that for me was seeing these public executions, of people who had
Yeah.
broken rules, and the rules were you left the QZ, so you're putting people at risk, and that is punishable by death.
Mhm.
Um,
That is
it's you can't leave, not even if you have a good reason. It's, "Oh, I'm smuggling to go help these other people." No, you can't leave.
yeah.
Not unless you are a soldier or pre-approved or whatever that is, but it really does strip people of their freedoms,
Mhm.
um, and yeah, it's the police state.
Yeah.
Which is
That
I
is
think everybody
so
that should be everyone's worst nightmare, no matter who it's from.
exactly.
But
Wow.
yeah,
And another thing
scary.
I love that they did in the show was, and you talked about this in the beginning, but expanding on the way that QZ works in the sense that they show the hangings, they give the reasons for it. I think even the officer that found Joel and Ellie and Tess at the end was like, they'll hang you for this. Like you left the QZ,
Mhm.
you're gonna be hanged. And you see the ration cards and the way everything is meticulously rationed out.
And how
Um,
miserable it is to be there.
yeah, and it's very, very much akin to like what you hear coming out of North Korea. So I love that connection. And again, especially what you said, Fedra is not American. I love that you're highlighting that because it's blowing my mind. I'm like, wait,
But
that's
what's
so
great
true.
too is that so they travel through all these different cities and states. And in the game, you get to see all these maps too. You get to see what the culture
Yes.
was like when things went down. You get to see the
Hmm.
road signs, and college campuses and schools and
Yeah.
hospitals and all these different spots and places of normal day-to-day life.
Hmm.
And it's in a new way kind of foreign.
Yeah.
Because it's dead now. No one's
Yeah.
there. People are gone. And the people that are there are the infected. Um,
Exactly.
and yeah.
Isn't it crazy how much we do take for granted, like the normalcy, and in a way, because we're so caught up in like social media and ideological battles, we kind of take for granted such basic freedoms or such
Can
um
I
yes,
can I
yes, you
tell
can.
you can I tell you something that I didn't realize that I missed so much during the pandemic?
Uh-huh.
I missed going to diners. Like, I missed going
Oh
to, like,
yeah.
a diner late at night after work or with friends and, like, getting some cheap food that you know how it's gonna taste. You can see the guy in the back making it
Yeah.
up, and it's a cheap cup of coffee. I just that and sitting down and just having and yeah, lots of people, and it was, there's poor people coming in, there's rich people coming in, there's people picking up orders, there's the policeman over there,
Yeah.
and, like, everybody's just doing their thing, getting their food, and having a nice
Hmm.
day. And, like,
Man.
that environment, I oh gosh, it was, like, a week in, and I was like, "I miss diners." I'm, like, already
Yes.
1 week in to the
Right.
2 weeks to slow the spread, which then got, you know, drawn
Yeah.
out quite a bit.
Yeah. Right.
But that thought just kept going. Maybe I was just craving diners, but I was that was a weird thing that I didn't realize, that normalcy,
Yeah.
that level of just day-to-day human beings just doing their
Man.
stuff in a diner.
Right. Which I'm trying not to skip over to like
Sorry,
episode
I know.
3. No, no, no,
Oh,
you're
oh,
great. It's just
episode
me
2.
and my brain, but like um absolutely. I agree with you. Again, from an artistic side of, you know, of this conversation, the way the set design is laid out is just really well done. Great
Mhm.
attention to detail. But let's dive over to episode 2.
Yeah.
Um because I was cringing for the first intro because I have a thing about unnecessary nudity. I just feel unnecessary nudity is unnecessary in the
Mhm.
words of the Rad Brad, one of my favorite YouTubers.
Wait, is this episode 2?
Episode 2, the
Episode
infected.
2.
So
Oh, okay.
in the
Right.
beginning, we have this like my what is it called? Mycology, the study of like fungus.
I don't know what the technical term is.
I have no
The
idea
study of
either.
fungi. Yeah.
Yes, that thing. We have this lady who is in Jakarta. She's like one
Mhm.
of the first people we assume who hears about the spread and goes to inspect, a body. But I just hate unnecessary nudity because they didn't have to make that person naked. They could have like put a cloth over them. I don't know, but anyway, that was freaky. I guess it does kind of just leave you the feeling they're trying to evoke is just ew. So
Mhm.
I guess that did gross me out a little bit and succeeded at that.
Now,
Um,
that first scene or that scene with that body is a
yeah,
bookend because at the very end, you see the spores coming out there too into
right.
Tess. Well,
Oh,
that's a bookend.
I didn't even think about that. That
He
is
opens them out, then you
so.
see it coming out, and, like, then you get to the end of the story or the end of that episode, and you see it again.
I did not realize that. I'm writing that down because I saw something like that in episode 3, but we will get there.
Mhm.
Episode 3, I have so much to say about that one. Anyway, that is a great observation. So, what did you think overall about uh everything to do with the opening of episode 2? Um,
Gosh.
because I feel like there's a Jakarta opening, and then there's the let's get to the state house
Mhm.
section of episode 2. So what
Mhm.
what were your initial thoughts going through this?
Gosh, I really liked the opener.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me think, okay, maybe we're gonna continue seeing this sort of thing throughout each episode,
Yeah.
either something back from when things went down in 2003
Yeah.
or some insight to someone's character. And so I was like, okay, I actually really enjoyed that because it helps develop the characters, and that's why I'm here.
Right.
um, and um, then we cut to our three, Tess, Joel, and Ellie, and I felt like it was going really, really slow.
Yes. For episode
Especially
2,
because
right?
the opening, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tense," and then it was, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
we're here."
Right,
Um,
right, right.
and, um, now I know what's gonna happen because 'cause I've played the game many times.
Right.
Um, and so, every time they're in a new space, a new building, a new sidewalk, I'm like, "Where in the game are we? Oh, yeah, no, this looks familiar. Oh, yeah, that's kinda cool."
Yeah.
That kinda thing.
Yeah.
Um, and even when, like, somebody mentions the guns or their pack or whatever, I'm like, "Ooh, is it upgrade time?" Like,
I
well,
know.
like, I'm like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah.
New stats or whatever.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and new stuff. Um, and new crafting. Yeah, that's fun in the
Yeah.
game. I've enjoyed that. Um, but the show for the second episode, it just felt really, really slow,
Mhm.
and I understand that's the natural progression, but
Yeah.
I did notice, like, while I was watching it, there's a lot of moments here that I feel like we could cut
Mhm.
or cut to something else, cut to someone
Mhm.
else, and we
Mhm.
hadn't we're following this troupe, this trio at this point, but
Yeah.
I partly kind of wanted something else that was this action, something that was fast moving or,
Mhm.
I don't know. There's so many scary spots in this game, you're going into the subways and you're surrounded
Yes.
by infected, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, can they see you? Can they hear you?" All this stuff,
Right.
and I feel like we just haven't had it yet, and I know we went into the museum, I know there was a little bit of that there, and we
Yeah.
got some more of the lore explained, which was good for episode 2, but
Mhm.
it really felt like a filler episode, which I
Interesting.
which I felt was, like, kind of weak as it's episode 2, I'm like,
Right.
"Come on,
It
let's
kind
keep
of has
going,
to
let's
hit. Yeah.
drive, just keep going," because some
Yeah.
people will not watch episode 3 now, they won't continue,
Right.
um, because some people are like, "Nope, don't have time for that."
Right, right. Okay, here's my theory. I
Okay.
feel I feel like episode 2 was effective for people who haven't played the game
Mhm,
because we only are introduced to the infected as these running things in the opening of what was it, episode 1.
mhm,
And then from then on we never really get to interact with them because we're
mhm.
kind of dealing with life behind the QZ. And I think for people who haven't played the game, the it was like a journey into what is this in a very creepy,
Unknown.
scary, horror like way.
Yeah.
Um, because we're kind of in the eyes of Ellie. She's never been to a hotel. She's like kind of what's the word? Like a little reckless. She's not as careful and experienced as Joel and Tess. So she goes in the hotel. She's banging things, ringing the bell, talking to herself, and kind of pushes. I think this like a luggage trolley thing, and a body falls out or a skeleton. And then throughout the rest of the show, as they're going through these hotels, through the museum, it's like, oh, what is this? There's a body covered in, da 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 da. And so we explain, oh, this is what happens to this body, da 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 da. And then now it's like, okay, now we have to be silent because there's a kind of infected that is very sensitive to sound. And so you go through that in a very horror like way where, she steps on the hand and there's this huge noise. And so we take the position of Ellie as, and again, for like people who haven't
As
played the game,
beginners.
as beginners who are getting introduced. Because as people who play the game, we had that over an
Mhm.
extended amount of time, like over hours, we were introduced to the affected. The viewers of the show either have to get it like all at once or slowly drift out throughout the show, or they could do this sort of like creepy thing. So yeah, it was a little slow, but I think and Neil Druckmann, the creator of The Last of Us, actually directed this. This was his directorial debut.
Oh,
So
good.
there could have been a bit of amateur, being his first time. There could have
Pacing
been
or something.
It could have
Yeah.
been better. Yeah, it could have been tighter. But I kind of liked the clicker, like let me say it this way, the homage to gameplay, because it was a little bit at the pace that you would go at in the game, where you crouching over things, you're going behind cupboards, you're trying to stay silent. I loved when Ellie had to turn around the counter. Actually, that was a very direct game nod, because
Or just don't step on the glass. Like,
don't step on the glass.
and like that pathway, you're just avoiding anything that could make noise. Now,
Exactly.
yeah, with the glass thing of him pushing the what was that? Like the pedestal down
Yes.
and making it crash over there, and then he continued to run so that
Yes.
the noise would go there. That's the game.
That's directly yeah. So in a way, sure, it was slow. I agree with that as well, but I also feel like it was, for people who have not played the game, it just spooks you enough to be like, okay, the next time they run into these, I know what they're facing, and I know now they know how to kill a clicker, because you demonstrate that the body shots don't work. So this could be like a foreshadowing for something else. Maybe more involved.
Yeah.
That would take a lot of explanation. I'm not sure, but
well,
I hear you.
each episode we're learning something new about the virus or the world that is not apparent within the video game.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm here, because I want to know more.
Right.
I'm enjoying that a lot.
Yeah. What did you think of the man, I don't know why I feel so much for Joel and Ellie in that relationship, because the guilt at the end where Tess has to kind of sacrifice herself. I mean, she is infected. She gets bitten, actually. I think they kind of allude to that happening in the museum. Am I right? Or what do you think? Does that happen then?
I think that's when that happens. I watched the episodes twice, or I'm trying to watch each one twice. I only watched last night's one once. But yeah, they're in my second watching, I was like, okay, where would she have gotten bit? Where is this moment? There's no sound that indicates that she was bitten in the museum, but it must have been, because that's where we saw the clickers.
Exactly.
The only other spot, I don't think there was another spot that I was like, oh, this makes sense, where she would have been alone. But yeah,
it's probably Tess. In the that scene, because there is a part where she kind of fights one off and goes behind a wall. So maybe they want us to put the pieces together and assume that that's where that happens. But so Tess, Ellie, and Joel eventually get out of that museum where they're fighting with the infected. They go, and Tess's tone starts to change once we figure out her ankle is broken. And
you say that as if her ankle isn't broken.
Oh no, because
her ankle is broken. No, it is.
It is broken, but there's far worse issues that she's not telling us.
Right.
But she's kind of trying to tell Joel, okay, maybe have hope. Maybe believe that this kid does have something to her, because she knows she ain't got a lot left. And I like the way she gets a little bit harsh with Joel
about it. Yeah,
snappy, kind of rude, not maybe rude. But she's like, go watch after her, go follow after her, and then we have the whole thing where we discover she's infected, and it's like, what do we do now when they're inside the Capitol house where they were supposed to meet with the Fireflies? And there's such a play of guilt that goes around both at that time and then after, as the episode is ending. I don't know if you caught on to the subtleties of what was going on, but what were your thoughts of the way that whole thing ended, including the tendril kiss, the disgusting tendril kiss of death?
So in this version, Ellie is the one who realizes what's happened before
Yeah.
Joel does. And that kind of struck me as weird. But then upon my second watching, I was like, well, maybe he just, in a way, views Tess as an invincible person
Mm-hmm.
because there's no possibility where he wouldn't have had her back. He wouldn't have protected her in that way, or that
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't have gotten out of it because she always has.
Yeah.
Um, and this is the first time that he's now, well, the second time finding himself
Yeah.
losing somebody that he's
Exactly.
bonded with.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. The guilt. Um, yeah, I think Ellie not wanting to leave
Mm-hmm.
is that for me, that's the display of that guilt.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on it? I want to know what you noticed.
I it was, I don't know, I don't know what other people would think. I'm curious to hear what you think, but sure, like Tess stays behind, and then that creepy fungus thing like walks up to her, and people say like, I found it absolutely disgusting. The whole like kiss of death thing, yeah, it was so gross. But I think that was the point, was to make it quite unbearably gross. Um, do you have a point to make about that?
What did you think about the way that they came in? Like they were looking for Ellie and Joel. They were looking for the live beings, not
Yes.
for the person who was already kind of infected and was transitioning.
Yeah, no,
Um,
okay.
that was really weird because they just kind of walked in once they saw her. It was all
Yeah,
calm. I'm like,
right.
how conscious are they? How human are they still? And what is
Right.
I'm that because we don't see that in the game.
Yeah,
We don't see well, in the game it's a different situation
it's
entirely.
very
It's not
different.
infected.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think my theory is they could sense that she was part of them. Um because now we're dealing with these infected are connected via these tendrils, and this connection thing, they kind of hint at that in the middle of the episode, that they're literally like connected, like with stalks and vines. I don't know what you call that in the fungus terminology for that,
Yeah, yeah.
but there's some sort of like tendril like thing that
Sorry.
like is intertwined in them, and that's how they realize that, oh, there's activity in the Capitol House.
Yeah.
So I think the reason they ran and just kind of kept going after Joel and Ellie was because they could already sense that one of them was already in the room. And I think that's why this other sir who came up to Tess didn't bite, but instead was like, let me put my tendrils into your mouth.
What's another bookend?
Yeah.
Is Tess, her last human act is to blow up and burn everything, which is exactly what the lady says at the beginning.
Oh, that is so good.
That makes a lot of sense. Not just
That
with the
is
spores,
so
but
good.
it's all right. The way to just
The
it's
only
destroy,
way to,
and that her last human act really is all right. Death for everyone here.
that's so good, Gabe. Oh
Thank
my
you.
goodness.
I
I'm
just
writing that
realized that
down.
something you said inspired that.
Burn it down. Okay, that was a really good tie-in, and I think that was intentional for sure.
Mhm.
But right after the Capitol House is blown up and we lose once invincible Tess, Joel, so the subtlety of that moment, just as the episode is about to end, Joel walks down the hill and doesn't look back at Ellie.
Mhm.
And is just so like, I guess, grieved, and also so angry and annoyed that this girl is the cause of him losing, his romantic partner at the time. And why did he have to take this job? It's going nowhere. And so out of frustration and anger and bitterness, just walks away. And then you just see Ellie like kind of unsure as to whether she needs to follow Joel down the hill, or she doesn't know if she's mad at Joel or if she should feel guilty for what just happened. But she lets out this kind of like like frumpy sigh, and it took me back to like being a young girl. I don't know what it was about that sigh, but just this collective, not collective, but like compounding feeling of certain moments of abandonment as a child where
Mm.
you just sigh and you're like, was that me? Like, was that because of me? Or, should I feel guilty or should I not feel guilty? And then you see kind of where Ellie goes with that in the next episode. But I don't know. Something in there really,
That's
I
something to
really
keep
love
in
the way
mind.
Bella did that.
Because Ellie, I think we kind of forget because of the world being so harsh. But she's
Hmm.
she's a child.
Yeah,
She's a kid.
right.
And she's still playing and having fun in this way. And she still maintains that as she gets older and goes through some harsher stuff. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, we're not just watching a story between two people and their relationship grow and evolve, but we're watching Ellie do just that.
Yeah.
She's becoming a young woman.
Hmm.
And that that's a interesting story in the apocalypse.
Yeah.
That's a little
And
different.
it's crazy with everything going on, how love still plays such a vital role, if more
Mhm.
than anything. It's like as humans, it intensifies. Like love intensifies rather than, sure, for some maybe it erodes and you just lose all sense of empathy, but it's such a struggle to maintain it in this sort of Last of Us world and preserve it. And loss of a loved one is truly quite devastating because
Mhm.
it's now I'm just bleeding into episode 3 at this point because I feel
Oh,
like these are
man.
points I should be making for episode 3, but it shows how important love is. I think the whole show game as a whole, Troy Baker, who plays Joel, who voices Joel, I mean,
Well,
in the
he
Last of Us
he
game.
what is it? The VR. He VR'd him too.
Yes, that's right. So he did technically like fully embody Joel
He
both
was
in voice.
Joel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
which is
was
why
Joel.
uh, by the way, just going back to episode 1, getting to see
Yeah.
Marlene come back in that way, I was like,
Yes,
"Yes!
we
Voice
love
actor
Marlene.
who gets to do it all the way and evolve with this
Absolutely.
character and just everything." Yeah.
I
I
loved it
loved that.
so much. And okay, slight tangent. This will be like a brief advertising break, not even an ad break, just a break before we get into episode 3. But I love how this adaptation respects the fans and
Mhm.
respects the IP, because we're seeing a lot of adaptations happen today where it's kind of like a screw you to the original fan base.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't understand where that's coming from. I don't know why a lot of creators and um, production companies, teams are deciding to flip things against the fan base. I think I'm specifically speaking to Velma. I don't know if you've seen
I haven't.
Velma.
I've avoided it. I like Scooby-Doo, and I wanna keep it that way, and
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
gonna
just,
entertain it.
dude, it
But
is the weirdest thing to see. I think we talked about this. I might have mentioned it, but it's just the strangest thing to see Velma and The Last of Us both like side to side get marketed at the
Oh,
same
yeah.
time on the same platform. When one, and I think the reason one's doing so well is because they really love the project, they
Mhm.
love the fans, and they're just throwing in a lot of ways to, you know, make the fans happy. Like, check it out. Pardon?
Enhancing the world and
Yes.
bringing new life to it in a
Yeah,
way that doesn't destroy the old life too.
exactly.
Whereas a lot of shows like Velma and some other fun ones,
A lot of,
there's a lot, there's
yeah,
tons, many videos have been made about these other shows,
yeah,
that
many.
just are tearing apart the fans, not just from the material itself, where they're making digs at the fans, but the creators up front being like, instead of saying, "Actually, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised," or like, "Try embracing this thing in this new way," it's, "No, it's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
Screw you.
You
Get
don't know what
lost.
you
Yeah,
want.
you don't know what you like anyway, and we can
Right.
do what we want because we have the power to do it." I'm
Which,
like, this makes me so
right.
icky.
It's
No.
very Fedra like, actually. To just be
Yeah.
like, hey, we have all the power. We know what's best for you. Trust us. And anyway, we're gonna like spit in your face.
Hmm.
But anyway, going back to
Last of
Marlene
Us.
just being in
Oh.
there, like it was just such a nice thing, both for the actress, because at the end of the show, I think she talks about her
Hmm.
return, and I was just really stoked to see that, and I think we're gonna get Troy Baker in there as well. Ashley Johnson might be in there as well.
Ah,
Um, they
so
haven't
cool.
appeared yet, but we'll see. Anyway, episode 3. Okay, so hard divider. We're now talking about episode 3. I had a really hard time with this episode because I did not see it coming. As
Mm.
people who have played the game, we kind of know the trajectory everything's
Yep.
supposed to take. This was like, wow, surprise.
This whole episode was not in the game.
It was not. Well, a little bit.
The characters are in the game.
The characters are in the
What
game.
what this episode was, there was not a single scene that happens in the game.
Yeah. Everything was different.
So that was alarming.
Exactly. But at the same time, in the grand story, in the themes that they're trying to tell with love, loss, and protection, with the attempts that they're trying to make in showing the transition from 2003 to 2023, I think this was a very effective episode. Granted, I'm very much of like a PG-13 type of, like I prefer things just be kind of suggested, but it wasn't graphic. So just to break it down, again,
This is total spoilers for
this is like spoiler city.
Please, I'd say tune out now if you don't want to hear those spoilers or you haven't watched the episode yet, and then just tune back in afterwards.
Yeah, but we're introduced to Ellie and Joel's next checkpoint, Bill and Frank. And Bill and Frank in the game, they are romantic partners. Like that is a part of the game. But then in this episode, we get to see how they meet and, well, how they end.
Well, yeah.
Yes, say what you gotta say.
So in the game, they are much more vitriolic
Yes.
characters. They're also younger, and they're also, it. I don't know if it's clear that they've been together for that long.
Yeah.
I know I think they say something about how they met after the outbreak, and that would form, a strong relationship with people, coming together in that
Yes.
way. But I was waiting that entire episode for, all right, when is it gonna stop being so nice and sweet and lovey-dovey? When is it gonna
Yes.
come out claws out? Like,
Yes.
where is that I can't handle you anymore? I need to go. Because
Yeah.
I'm waiting for us to see Ellie and Bill butt heads. I'm just waiting for it.
Oh, Bill was brutal to Ellie in the game.
And
Like,
Nick Offerman was great too, by
he
the way.
was
So
he
good.
acted his heart
acted.
out. I was like, dang, you're giving all this for a series based off a game? But no, he really, really went in. And there's so many undertones with this show that I kind of don't know where to start with this episode in particular.
Right.
And let's talk about Bill's character first of all.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you a second ago too. You were about to say something about Ellie, but
was I?
yeah.
What was I gonna
We'll
say?
get to it. We'll get to it. Whatever it is.
Takarika, hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello.
Do you know? Have you met Takarika?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Hi.
She's with Fair. She's awesome.
Oh,
I
cool.
love her. She's such a blessing. And Brent is also. I don't know if Brent is still here, but Brent said hello in the chat as well. Shout out to you.
I don't think I can see the chat. Oh no, I can.
Yes, comments at the very top.
Cool.
Yeah.
Neat.
But so Bill's character, Bill is like they're very explicit with it. And I guess this is 2003, 2 years after 3 years after, first of all, what was it called? Well, Y2K. So we have this sort of doomsday prepper guy,
Mhm.
Bill. He has everything you need to survive any sort of doomsday outbreak. And so I can assume this character, is modeled off of like the Y2K doomsday preppers, and
He
um,
prefers survivalist?
that's true. He does literally
Um
identify as a survivalist,
Yeah.
but he's like rough. He kind of loves the aloneness and introversion that
Yeah,
this outbreak affords
he's
him.
able to do what he needs to do.
Yeah, he was like gleeful, like after Fedra like
Yeah.
escorted everyone out, and it's like, okay, here we go. I can emerge from my bunker. Time to like, he just got everything from the hardware store, like set up camp. And I think they show this scene where he's sitting, just kind of like eating food and watching people get blown up at his gate, which just goes to show like he was a very like hard guy. And I would say like hard to the point of like he probably experienced some sort of loss. I'm
Mhm.
assuming maybe like his mom died, because there is a scene where he has a piano that belonged to like his mom or grandma or something.
Mhm.
But he's just so like out of it, to the point that he's perfectly fine with isolation, and he laughs at people getting, caught up in his traps. But there is a strong connection made with like conservatives, and I guess kind of living this double life, because we later see that Frank can see him for what he is, which I
Mhm.
guess in the show they're trying to say that he has a soft side, or that he's gay, or that he just has a soft side. And honestly, like,
And that it's art, it's music that brings it out.
and
It's a
it's music,
song, it's a
right?
song. It's it's a human connection.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, as
I
someone from, we're fair in the
Yes,
arts
yeah.
thing. Art, it's music.
As artists,
And gosh,
yeah.
there's that saying that's, when you can't speak anymore, you sing, and when you can't sing anymore, you dance. And
Hmm.
it's that you you can feel things from watching dance and from participating in dance that you
Yeah.
can't from speaking with somebody or
Wow. Yeah.
singing. And like that human connection really has no bounds in that way. You
Exactly.
can just communicate so much. And they're in the middle of, this is the first time he's talked to somebody in years. Um and it's almost an instant connection because of music
Was it
in that way.
2007? It was like a few years later, like
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah.
We've been alone
Yeah.
for 4 years and loving it. I can't relate. I'm like, sir, no way. But yeah, it's music that kind of brings down that sort of like iron shell or whatever he had up.
Yeah.
And um I can only just imagine what it's like in a time like that. First of all, like 2003, no social media. So he's not going to get like a proxy of connection
Mhm.
through social media or anything like that. The only thing he's going to get is another human showing up at his
Mhm.
door. And, I, anyway,
Can I add on this point?
yeah.
Um, Human beings need 3 things. I don't remember who said this, but
Yeah.
I love this idea. It's, they're 3 S's, shelter, sustenance,
Hmm.
and stories. And
Shelter.
you aren't human unless you have all 3 of those.
Wow.
And what we've seen with Bill's character is he's got the shelter, he's got the sustenance, he's able to do it, but he doesn't have a way of telling somebody, "This was my mother's piano.
Yeah.
This is my favorite song. This is how it should
Wow.
be played. This is my garden. Let me, find a
Yeah.
meaning for life." And that's what stories do.
Hmm.
That's why this show has so much heart because it's about the passing of stories. It's about learning about Sarah and realizing she's not Ellie,
Yeah.
and taking your history and continuing with it in that way, and
Well
retelling your
said.
story. But for Bill, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is totally like that's his missing piece.
Yeah,
He doesn't
exactly.
have his purpose in that way, but it's no one to have a story with.
Yeah. Oh, you're good with words. It's very well
Thank
said.
you.
And Emma Swan has said all the survival tactics prepping in the world can't prepare you for the absence of human connection. And yes, that is such a wonderful point.
Yeah, really.
There was a study I either read or heard or came across. It was this show. There's a show where people could stand like a chance to win like a lump sum of money if they're alone for, was it like a year or a lot of months or a lot
What
of
is
days?
that? Is it just Alone?
Is
That's
it
a show.
Alone?
Isn't it called Alone? There's
Where
Naked and
so
Afraid, and then there's Alone, I
there's
think.
Naked and Afraid, and then there's Alone. I have never seen Alone. I don't know if it's the one, but like pretty much a good number of the participants quit because they couldn't take the isolation, and they were all survivalists.
Yeah,
Is that
and
Alone?
I think that is that one.
Yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah, not everyone can be a hermit, and even
Yeah.
hermits, like, we don't know what the cavemen were doing, but there's cave drawings.
Yeah.
They're sharing stories.
Exactly.
They're telling their story. They're telling
Right.
their culture. They're creating something, and it's still here, and we're still finding new things, which is amazing.
It is amazing.
So cool.
Stories, yeah. Man, I have so much to say on this point, but Jordan Peterson also talks about like how we're kind of created or made for stories, or we need stories. And again, the reason we're talking about this in the midst of like all the other like work that you're doing, stuff that I'm doing, just bonding together over this story of like The Last of Us, and it just kind of giving us life and trying to give other people life through celebrating the story, again, just goes to show where it's hard to peel us as humans away from that, and away from those shared experiences. So I love that. I love the pointing that out.
Jumping off of just that point,
yeah.
I think part of the reason why they changed this last episode so much with how they decided to end it, I think is probably directly because of our own pandemic. And I think it's because in the game we have a very different Frank and Bill. They are spiteful to each other. They are hateful. They're snarky and hurt. Both of them have hurt each other. And they are both wounded, and they want nothing to do with each other at this point. And it's really toxic. And I think in our own world, we have enough of that already that I think probably Druckmann wanted to say, all right, I'm going to give you the love story here.
Exactly.
This is the perfect ending. This is a world where people don't go and get old and die in that way.
Yeah.
This is the best outcome you could ever have in this entire world now.
Right.
That you are completely safe. You are able to sustain yourself. You're free to do what you like. You can create art. You can do paintings. You can do whatever you want. You can have your garden with your strawberries and all the nice things. And you can make music.
Yeah.
And you're there with the person that you care about.
Right.
And you don't have that fear anymore.
Exactly.
And when the fear does come, it's still okay because you've got this other person and you're making friends. And it's
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you know what's another interesting thing that I sort of was brought to my attention? Before I get into that, Paulina says, as John Didion said, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. Oh, that is good. That is so good.
Joan Didion's good. I've only read a few of her things, but she's good.
I need to read more.
Thanks, Joan Paulina.
Didion. Thank you so much. Okay, so interesting thing that they highlight in this is that I don't know the political preferences of Joel or Tess, but you see they're pretty much setting up Bill as this like proper like conservative 2000s dude.
Yeah.
And in this like end time, I don't know, of course all we have is just this whatever government is over everyone, they exist. There's not really this binary of red and blue, But I love how they show that they're able to build a friendship over like their common connection and things that they can identify like within each other. But despite the fact that they probably were like polar opposites politically.
Yeah, yeah. And that like both of them recognize that maybe they don't get along so well, but
Yeah,
Tess and Frank do get along. And
exactly.
that is good for both of them.
Yeah,
And that they're willing to say, okay, yeah, I'll go to this event, I'll go to the party, I'll show up because
yeah,
I care about you.
exactly.
Yeah.
And also, I think this was intentional, but trying to draw in the other complexity that there are like conservatives that are queer or that are
Mm-hmm.
gay or that, you know, this one side, this don't tread on me side of America isn't just this flat, evil, you
Mm-hmm.
know, white, straight, yada, yada, yada. I think it was interesting that they painted it that way and without making it a sort of, oh, he's a hypocrite or, oh, he's a failure of a person. In this end time, like humans are just complex. And if you're not infected, you're a complex human that's just trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated that. And that's something Neil, I think, talked about. You say Druckmann, I say Neil, but we both mean Neil
Neil
Druckmann.
Druckmann, right.
Something that he kind of talked about a bit, but I appreciate that because you don't really see that on TV these days. That
Yeah.
especially when it comes to portraying conservatives, or
even that they're just in a positive light.
at
Like
all. Exactly.
for a popular show.
Yes.
Without making people into complete caricatures. I didn't feel like
Yeah.
Bill was a caricature at all.
Not at all.
And neither with Frank. I thought both of
Yeah.
them were unique individuals
Yeah.
who agree to disagree on things. I mean, like you hear that one
Yes.
fight that they're having while they're running or something,
Yeah.
and Frank is saying like, "You believed the government was Nazis before they were Nazis," or something like that.
Right.
And I was like,
Yeah.
that's so funny too. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think like what? I'm like 5 years old in 2000. I wasn't 5 years old, but I was pretty young in
Yeah.
2003. I'm like, I don't really remember this.
Yeah. I have no
But
idea.
right. Um, but that that is kind of humorous in a way, but also kind of
Right.
serious too. I'm like, we've seen authoritarian reach in our country nowadays, you know. We
Yeah.
see this often, and I thought that was just a funny point.
That was a really good. I
It
love that
also
line.
it also kind of made me question too within their world,
Mhm.
because earlier in that episode we see how quickly the government agencies, the Fedra, had
Mhm.
decided to enact things. At that time, it was probably government, though. It was like the US government
Yes.
deciding, okay, yes, you are uninfected, but we can't house you. So we're
Mhm.
going to put you in a pit and kill you all.
Yeah.
Mass graves. I'm like, that is
Mhm.
terrifying. And that, that kind of leads back to this Nazi idea. And
Yeah.
we've seen that happen countless of times all over the world
Mhm.
in many, many different forms. And that that is another gosh, I lost my point. No, it's
Oh
gone.
no!
What was I saying?
You're
Something about
saying Fedra, the U.S.
the
government,
Fedra, the US
before we had
government.
Fedra,
Oh,
before,
that in their world,
yeah,
um, how quickly that shift to they're not Nazis, now they are.
yes,
How how would one determine whether they actually were beforehand
hmm,
versus afterwards? Because afterwards,
yes,
yeah, we can confirm, well, they're not necessarily Nazis, but they did actions that Nazis also partook.
yeah,
But that that line of, okay, who's right on this?
hmm,
In
yeah,
their world, this 2003, before the outbreak, Nick Offerman's character Bill believes that those people who run the government are Nazis in
right,
his version, or that they are that extreme, that authoritarian, that
hmm,
that evil.
hmm,
Um, yeah, I just think it's interesting to see
yeah,
like the different psychologies, and that like Frank is somehow able to reckon that um there's my Aussie coming out.
oh,
I'm half Australian, by the way.
please feel
Um
free to slip into the Aussie accent.
that no the reckon but that he's somehow reckoning with this idea that uh they weren't and then they were.
Yeah.
Instead of they always were or they
Yeah.
never were.
Right.
Now they both agree that they always or that they were.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, it sounds so
They
confusing.
were before
They but
weren't.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It
that
is interesting.
feels weird today too because
Mm-hmm.
I mean like there are things I believe that I'm like, "Oh, I can suppose this thing. I can make this assessment. I can try to come up with an assumption in some way about what's going on big picture."
Yeah.
But how do we know if they've flipped already?
Yeah.
Whoever's in
How?
charge,
What is
whoever.
that
How do you
line?
what is that line
Yeah.
where people flip? And
Where
how do
you're
you
like,
know if
yes,
somebody's already flipped? Was it the outbreak or was it before that?
exactly.
Um,
With the pandemic,
and
that was a question
and
many were asking.
for me right now, the thing that I'm dealing with a lot is,
Mm-hmm.
or that I think about quite a bit, um, is how so quickly we were able to deem people as inessential.
Yes. Or
Yeah,
just simply say that they're absolutely
these people are,
evil and less
or
than human.
in this world, the government decided these people were worth less
Yes.
and were better dead than alive because alive they could spread evil, they could spread the disease, they could
Right.
spread the infection, they could spread violence, they can make things worse
Mm-hmm.
rather than realizing people make things better. You
Exactly.
just killed all your doctors. You just
Right.
killed all your mothers. You just killed all your, like, whatever.
Yeah.
You just killed the guy who's going to cure cancer or whatever it is.
Right.
Every single person has something to bring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as someone who's pro-human, I'm like, this is the point.
Yeah.
Every single person is worth something. Even the
Exactly.
people that I hate and I disagree with and that I have a hard time
Yes.
loving, I can still see value to them and I want to honor and respect that dignity.
Oh yeah.
And that this game show play with that line. That idea came up last night while I was watching it of the inessential
Yeah.
and that these people and I'm like, gosh, for one of it was that woman holding her baby. And I'm like, oh no.
Oh
Like how
yeah.
that is oh
The cut from
the
like the
complete
skull and
innocent
yeah.
of this child who's a
Mm-hmm.
feet like just a little baby, you can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that child isn't even worth saving to
Mm.
the government because
Yeah.
they've deemed this child as not worth
Just
anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just terrible. And it's worth
Yeah.
thinking about that line. Like, where
Yeah.
do you draw that line as individuals? Like,
Yeah.
all of us need to think about this and know and have a conviction for
I
that.
think Peter Boghossian does a really good job of that. Have you
Oh
watched
yeah,
his series?
I have
He's got
not.
this reverse Q&A series on his
Uh-huh.
YouTube channel where he has all these lines on the ground starting with neutral and then
Hmm.
going all the way out to agree and disagree on either side with strongly agree and disagree, slightly agree and disagree, and then agree and disagree. Oh, maybe it's switched slightly and agree and disagree.
Hmm.
But so what he does is, and it's not even like, it's not a debate. It's not a back and forth in that way.
Yeah.
He's just asking people. He'll have like a topic, a question, or a statement that somebody can say, "Oh, I agree with this," or "I disagree with this."
Hmm.
And then he goes and he asks them, "Why do you believe this?"
Right.
And in an attempt to understand them. Um, and it helps people reinforce their ideas of, yeah, this is why I believe this. This is how I got to this conclusion. And then he asks, what would it take for you to just move one spot over the line and move to strongly disagree or to slightly agree? Or like,
Wow.
what would it take? What would you have to hear in order to reach that point? And you can see
Interesting.
how agreeable or disagreeable people are, or
Mm.
how considerate they are in terms of, well, I guess maybe I would do that, or I'd have to hear this thing. I'd have to know this number is certain, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But it's really great in terms of understanding how the human brain kind of works and then
Hmm.
seeing all the different people that he asks these questions to, because sometimes people really, really disagree with each other. And
Right.
it's a really fascinating sort of game and experiment that he does. And it's again not
Wow.
really a debate. It's just a thinking game.
Yeah.
In
Exactly.
knowing where are my lines?
Yeah.
What would it take for me to move just one step?
I have
What
to
would
check
it
this
take?
out.
It's
Yeah.
so good. I'll send it to
Okay.
you. And in
Yes,
fact,
please.
I'll put a link to Peter Boghossian's. I'll send you it in the chat, in the private chat,
Okay.
so you can
Sounds
post it
good.
too. Yeah.
Sweet. But yeah, I um well, thank you for sharing that. I have to check that
Yeah.
out.
No.
But it's
Something we
such a
said came with that. I don't know.
right. But I love the thought experiments that the whole game, whole show brings to the forefront of like,
Mhm.
hey, if we were faced with this, like how would you trust Fedra? Would you, and where would you lose that trust? How would you know
Right.
your autonomy, your freedom of speech, freedom of movement has been restricted? Like where would you draw that line? Um
And where would you fit in this world?
where
Would you
would
be
you
a
fit?
firefly? Would you be part of the QZ? Would you be a
Oh,
smuggler? Like, would you be the survivalist type? Like, where
yeah.
would you fit? Would you be dead? Like, so many
Wow.
people in this world off themselves
Yeah,
because they don't see hope. They don't
exactly.
see the future. They don't they're lost.
Yeah. Where would you be, Gabe?
Oh my gosh. That's ah um gosh. Probably maybe a firefly. Um
Mm,
but
interesting.
I think I probably would be with Tommy.
You
Uh
would be with Tom.
I
Oh,
don't wanna
okay.
I'm like, I
No
don't know what the
spoilers
game's
yet.
gonna happen, and I don't wanna say any.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd probably be with Tommy
Okay.
and that future.
I see. Got you.
Not with Tommy, but, like,
But
I'd be
like
doing.
around
Yeah,
Tommy's
what
area.
that thing, yeah.
Okay.
If you
Um,
know, you know.
if you know, you know. I would, if this was like post, like right where we are in we would be in episode 1 in the QZ. I honestly, I don't know if I would have just gone with the flow and felt safe if I just did everything according to Fedra. Cause like I I don't know. Like I kind of do that now. I'm kind of passive. I'm like, should I vote? Meh. And in a way, I feel like a lot of people in my age group kind of are.
Mhm.
We're like, yeah, we feel like we have freedom, but do we really have freedom? Are we really using our voices right now? Do we care about bills and laws that are passed? We're kind of not paying attention to it. I think I
Mhm.
would end up, and I hope not, because I love The Last of Us. I hope if anything were to happen, I would know everything that I watched in the show. But I think I might be one of those passive Fedra QZ occupants who just
But if you were in it for 20 years with
for
something,
20
what would
years.
it take? Oh, yeah, here. So, what would it take for you to say, I'm no longer aligned with these people? Not to align
Oh,
yourself with another group, but
yeah.
to say, I am not aligned with the QZ. What would
The
it
the
take?
hangings.
That
I
would,
think
okay, so as soon as you see that they're punishing people who aren't going along with their
yeah.
idea of how things should go, that's where
Yeah.
you would draw the line.
Yeah. Cuz I think
Mm,
my brain would be like, okay, if people are infected and they are coming into the QZ, then I I can see why they would go to the means of like, okay, we have to silence them forever.
yeah.
Sadly, but if they're perfectly healthy people within the QZ whose crime is simply leaving,
Mhm.
or being in an area where like there's a skirmish or like a firefly explosion, then I would be like, the punishment is not equal to the crime, and the crime in and of itself is not necessarily illegal.
Yeah, especially because they have these, like, the little tester things to see if you
Exactly.
have it or not, and we
Right.
know that they have those pretty early on because in this
Hmm.
last episode, Nick Offerman had one,
Yes. Right.
and it was when he found Frank, so it was at least by 2007, we think.
Yeah.
That was the year. Yeah.
Exactly. We
Mm.
have a comment. Let me read it
Oh,
real quick.
Kim, what'd you say?
Kim J, have you heard of the milligram experiments? It was done in a university back in the 60s. People were asked to give electric shocks to another participant. I think I've heard of this. Who was pretending
Yeah.
to be hurt. They found that the majority of people would go on to give a potentially fatal electric shock just because a scientist in a lab coat told them to.
Mhm.
I think I read about this in a Malcolm Gladwell book. But
Yeah.
have you heard of this thing?
Yes. Yeah. No, I've heard of this experiment. It's
Dude,
pretty scary.
yeah.
And I am sad that more people didn't know about this experiment and it wasn't as popular or
Yeah.
spoken about before the pandemic.
Yeah. No. Okay, so you brought a great point. And the whole, so being this passive participant that I think I would be in the
Mhm.
QZ, I think we see a lot of those parallels with cancel culture, where people are justifying like terribly obscene punishments that are not equal to the crime. Like, for example, someone says something that they don't like, that equals deplatforming. And like,
Mhm.
oh no, we have to strip this person of their job. Like, kind of enabling this tyranny, this totalitarian thing.
Mhm.
And it makes me wonder, do we have to wait for things to reach a level of the infected in order to realize, like, oh, we need to kick
The
our
pot's
ethical
boiling.
gears,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
are we already there?
I think we're frogs in a pot that's
Yeah.
slowly boiling. And I think it's the gosh, this is the slippery slope, you know?
Yeah.
It's the line being pushed. What are you okay with? Well, we're slowly year after year saying,
Yeah.
"Well, this is okay. Yeah, well, I'm willing to say yeah. I'll download the app. Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
terms
it's
and
got a new
conditions.
feature. Yeah, I'll just accept. Yeah."
Yeah.
There's more of that.
Hmm.
And gosh, we need to be more disciplined
Yeah.
in
And
what we believe and show our dollars, where that what we're supporting needs to be shown with where
exactly.
we're actually going to put our money where it is. I
Absolutely.
don't know if that makes any sense or
That
that
makes a
sentence
lot of
made
sense.
sense, but
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Frogs in like a pot of
frogs in
water,
water. Um,
slowly heated up.
and yeah, that's the hard part is because you don't realize you're boiling until you're dead or you're almost
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah. Um, okay, we're gonna talk about the last section of episode 3. Just
Yes.
before that, just gonna read Emma's comment. It seemed to me like Fedra was just looking for reasons to kill the Boston occupants. Honestly, it felt like they were just bloodthirsty. It was almost like they were the anti-human sort of. I mean, they were there to protect, but at the same time, they were just happy to find someone breaking the rules and put out the fullest extent of punishment. Um, so yeah, it's really thinking about all the parallels, but
There's a wonderful musical. It's one of my favorite shows. It's called Urinetown. And it's
okay.
spelled urine like pee, Urinetown.
Oh, okay. You're
And
in town.
Urinetown. And in it, it's about a world where you have to pay to pee. It's very, very fourth wall breaking, um, very dark humor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, set in the future, and it's because there's a water shortage. So there's
Mm-hmm.
not enough things to actually sustain people here. Now that we see the 3 S's there, you have the shelter in the QZ, you might have stories, but you don't really have the things to keep you going. They have ration cards and
Mm.
everybody's trying to get more and they're relying on the smugglers to keep
Mm-hmm.
things afloat.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that no, that's
But
interesting. You're
but
in town.
but
Okay.
in Urinetown, you have to pay to pee, and if you can't pay to pee, then you get sent off to Urinetown, which is death.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So
That's so
it's a
weird.
wonderful show. It's very funny. Highly,
Okay.
highly recommend it if you're a musical theater person or you just like to listen to something that makes you laugh. Yeah,
Definitely.
it's very, very good.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that idea of looking
Yeah.
it's because they can't keep themselves afloat, and yeah, I
Mm.
think you're right, Emma, that they do just they're looking for reasons to kill the people there
Yeah.
because they can't 1, it keeps people in line, it keeps people in check and on their toes,
Mm-hmm.
and 2, there's not really enough to make sense for what they're doing, like, they're
Yeah.
burning bodies as a job.
Yeah. Maybe that's their purpose.
Yeah.
Like for Fedra, because like we've lost everything in this world, the people who are on their side, that's their purpose, is
Mm.
enforcing fear and having power. Whereas where you look at like later on, like where kind of episode 3-ish, kind of there, with Bill and Frank, with Joel, Tess, Ellie, they're sort of now fighting for the survival of those they love. What if Fedra's purpose, whoever made up that Fedra force, their purpose was to exert power by any means
Yeah.
necessary? And so
Yeah.
it's just like, yeah.
We don't even know who's in charge of.
Yeah. There's no
Fedra.
president. There's no leader.
Nope.
That's
Who's
so
pulling
fascinating.
the strings? We don't know.
Yeah.
And
Maybe that's a good
maybe that's
question.
something that's gonna be revealed in the show. Maybe that'll be something that they play around
Right.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
Who
what was the
knows?
point of the Fireflies again? Like, are they just a rebellion against Fedra? Is that just the core of their mission?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that they're the hope, you know?
Yeah.
They're the people who are saying, you know, we can't be this authoritarian. We have to be human still in this way. But
Yeah.
like you said in your live stream, your video where you're talking about it, even just being an animal, the fireflies, you're
Yeah.
dehumanizing in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, because not everything's right with them either.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not great at running things either.
Yeah.
Nobody seemed to found the perfect way to do it, except for
Right.
in this version, Bill and Frank,
Exactly.
who I'm like, okay, Bill and Frank, you guys literally just you made a paradise. Good for you.
I know.
There's so few issues with
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Man.
no.
I love the ending. Okay, so the ending of episode 3, when Ellie's in the car and she's like, she's never been in a car before. That was so
Spaceship.
I love how they pointed that out. I mean, yeah, she said like it's like a spaceship. And she's like, what was she like, rolling the window down? She didn't know what the seatbelt was.
She's playing with all the what is it? The drawer, whatever
the
it's
drawers,
called.
the glove compartment,
Everything.
gets the cassette tape. Oh, what did you think of like the whole 80s music theme that they've woven into the show?
80s means trouble. I think it's great. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's smart, and yeah. It's one of those things that they've added to the show that I think enhances the world instead of detracting, because it very well could be in the game and we just haven't noticed it.
Yeah. I mean, there is
and it also, gosh, the tie-in with music. I was kind of thinking while I was watching the episode, I was like, oh, is this where a guitar comes into play? You know, like, are we going to see this thing?
Yeah.
Because that's a big point for Joel
Mm-hmm.
and him teaching Ellie how to play the guitar and being a mentor in that way, as we'll come to see. But I was hoping, that would be where we'd get some guitar stuff. But I was like, okay, but they're already setting it up as, all right, music. Music is the connecting thing here.
Yeah, I love that. As artists, as people who are hoping to use, are using art, hoping to use art to spread a pro-human message in the midst of what I can only describe as a fascination with tearing each other down. I think they made a great illustration of the importance of art, of story, of music, connection through those art forms. Even just what's his name, Bill, taking pride in the dishes that he prepared, and even in the post-apocalyptic landscape, you know, knew to pair rabbit with. Do you know what that wine was? There was a name that they had for it, but I just love how they show like I have no idea, but it was lovely to see him take care and pride in that, even to the end. You know, the end. It was cool to see how they were showing time and time again that art matters. Art keeps us alive. Art
I think
reminds us we're human.
This is just me now on the spot, like, oh, this connects here and this connects here.
No, yeah,
but
go
it's
for it.
the guitar music that we hear in the game that's used in the theme song is also, when you think about the instrument, it's a musical instrument that vibrates. It moves. It's sonar in a way. And how do the clickers see things? You know, they hear it, but it's, I mean, in the game, you can visually see sounds. There's like a feature you can like turn on, like night vision, basically, where you can you can see what sounds are being picked up on.
Right.
And I think music is a really important motion through that.
Mhm.
But the guitar is, I'm just realizing, like, oh, that's a good instrument for it.
Yeah.
Some instruments wouldn't necessarily be, yeah, in that
Fitting.
way.
I
But
mean,
I don't
yeah,
know.
I like that. No, that's a good
Music
one.
makes sense, and it ties
Mm.
in with the virus,
Mhm.
the fungi.
The
Yeah.
fungi echolocation. Man, it's such a great show. I was surprised by episode 3, but I
Yeah.
think it goes to show like the whole, the okay, when for people who have seen it, if you have seen it, you might remember the point where Joel walks out after reading the letter from Bill, because Bill and I'm hoping for people who are tuned into this have seen episode 3. So spoiler alert, but at the end of the episode, Bill and Frank have lived a full life, and unfortunately, Frank was ill with some sort of
Some disease,
dystrophy,
cancer,
like
something.
something that made life hard for him, and
Mhm.
he made the decision that he was going to end life, his life. But it turns out both of them, like Bill, actually, for the sake of our conversation, it might help to say that Bill probably couldn't see himself grieving the loss of like the only person who has kind of carried him through these lonely
Mhm.
20 years, and so he also decided to end it for himself as well.
Mhm.
um, but at the end of that, he writes a letter to Joel and basically gives him a key to a car with, access to a battery, and gives him access to his weapons, like a wall, like a room full of weapons, and
The
says,
upgrade.
the upgrade, shout out to the gamers, and says like, keep Tess safe, because that was the person that Joel was protecting. And I love the way Pedro Pascal like walks, once he reads that, he walks out of the house and just kind of has to like compose himself, because he's
Mhm.
lost Tess, he's lost Sarah, and here is the kid at that dining table who kind of reminds him of the loss of Sarah and is kind of responsible for the loss of Tess, and he's like, well, anyway, I still have to just go on with this child. I just love the way they tied that in. But
And
again, just
I think that
yeah.
that helps, uh, the audience understand, especially the new audience,
Mhm.
understand why they are bonded so deeply, not just
Yeah.
because Tess's last wish is for Joel to do this thing to restore the world with the vaccine that comes from Ellie or whatever it is, or to just
Right.
get her there and to just be open to happiness or hope in this new way that
Yeah.
he's been shut off from for years and become bitter to,
Yeah.
but that it opens up this idea of you need to protect somebody and
Yeah.
someone needs to protect you too.
Exactly. Woo!
And that
That's a good line right there.
it's okay to open up again to somebody that's new.
Yeah.
Um, and for him, that's especially hard given what he's had to go through.
Yeah.
And poor Ellie, orphan, friendless, all alone, doesn't know anything about really America in how to get across it or how to survive by herself.
Yeah.
She needs him.
Yeah. Can't swim. Has not been in a
Can't
car.
swim. Oh my gosh. Never been in a car.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. Well, thank you so much, Gabe,
Yeah,
for this uh deep dive into The Last of Us.
of
Thank you
course.
everyone who has tuned in. This was pretty much a recap and a deep dive into episodes 1, 2, and 3. And I believe we're gonna be back for episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Yep.
So I might set that live stream up early if you want to get notified for that. That's going to be in about 3 weeks' time as the episodes come out. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Of course, drop a comment below, like this video so it gets blasted out to other people, share it with friends who are also watching The Last of Us. And Gabe, is there anything you'd like to tell the lovely people, or
Just
any note you'd like to leave us
stay
on?
safe, think critically,
Yes.
make your own risk assessments, and treat people with understanding. Yeah.
That is so good. couldn't have said it better myself.
Mwah!
I
Do
love
well,
that.
everybody. Do well.
Do well. Have a great evening. And we'll see you for 4, 5, and 6. All right. Bye. Y'all.
Bye.